Alright, so this is the fourth video in our 10th unit, so it's going to be solving by least common denominator. So in class today we talked about solving by cross multiplication. So the only time we can use cross multiply is when we have a single fraction equal to a single fraction. So there's only one thing on both sides of the equal sign. And if we're solving with that method, that's when we can use cross multiply, So some steps, if you want to pause the video and write these down in your notes. So we're going to identify the least common denominator of all the fractions. You'll see that there's going to be multiple things, at least 3 terms in the equation, not just 2 like there was in class today. After we identify the least common denominator, we're going to multiply the entire equation, so every single term, by that least common denominator. You'll see that the reason we do that is when we multiply the whole equation by the LCD, we're able to eliminate all fractions from the equations, and then we just have a linear or quadratic left that we hopefully know how to handle. And again, we are solving, so we're solving for x. Anytime I ask you to solve something, you're not finished until you get x equals. Solving means I want you to tell me what value of x makes this equation true. We talked about extraneous solutions in class. So if the x value makes you divide by 0, so if we solve an equation, let's say get x equals 3, but I plug 3 back into the original equation and it makes me divide by 0, we can't have that. So we got to check for extraneous. It's just one more step after we finish. It takes 2 seconds. All right, so here's my first example. If you notice what I mean in class today, we had a fraction equal to another fraction. So we only had 2 terms, but here we have 3. We have 2x plus 7 over x plus 4. We have a term of just the number 2, and we have a term of 2x plus 19 over x plus 4. So we can't cross multiply here because we have 3 things. So what we did today in class can't work on an equation like this. So we're going to have to follow the steps from the last slide. So what we have here is we need to identify the least common denominator. And the least common denominator is just similar to adding and subtracting. So when we're adding and subtracting, we're identifying the least common denominator, which is just what factors do I need to put in the denominator in order to make them the same. So here my denominators are just x plus 4, and both of them have it. So step 1, identifying my least common denominator. My least common denominator is x plus 4, because that's what they have in common. So what we're going to do here is we're going to multiply every term. And if you want me to label this step 2, if you're following the notes that from the last slide. Step 2 is we're going to multiply every single term by x plus 4, that least common denominator. And when we're multiplying fractions means it goes in the numerator. Whatever you're multiplying by goes in the numerator. The key here, let's just do this in a different color. The key here is every single term gets multiplied by whatever the LCD is. So here my LCD is is x plus 4. So every single term is going to get multiplied by the LCD of x plus 4. Okay, and what I multiplied by, I just did in red so you can see that I am adding an x plus 4 to every piece of the equation. And we're allowed to do that as long as we do it to each term. So now, here's why we do this. If we look at the first term, 2x plus 7 over x plus 4, x plus 4's cancel out. If I look at the last term, 2x plus 19 times x plus 4 over x plus 4, x plus 4 cancels out. In this middle term here, nothing cancels, so I'm not really going to do anything with that. I'm just going to distribute here in a second. So we have 2x plus 7, x plus 4 is gone, minus 2x plus 4 equals 2x plus 19. We need to distribute, now be careful here, this is a negative 2. So we need to distribute the negative 2 to both things. And then we're solving for x. So we need to combine like terms. So I've got 2x and negative 2x, which is 0. Those are gone. 7 minus 8 is negative 1. So we combine like terms on the left side. Divide by 2, not 2x. Divide, and we end up with x equals negative 10. And the last step, I told you to check for extraneous solutions. So we just take the value of negative 10, go back to the original, and make sure if I plug in negative 10, I don't divide by 0. And the only x's I have in the denominator is x plus 4. And if I do negative 10 plus 0, negative 10 plus 4, I get negative 6, which isn't 0, so we're fine. Negative 10 is not extraneous. And again, extraneous is if I find an x value to be a solution, but it also gives me 0 in one of the denominators, then that makes it extraneous. But here, that's not the case. Oops. All right. Second example is pretty similar, but if you look, my third denominator here is a quadratic. With these, we're going to want to factor this first so we can identify our LCD easier. So, I'll do it up here, so I need to factor x squared minus 7x plus 10 factors to x minus 5, x minus 2. For the sake of a shorter video, I'm not going to go through the factoring process, but just like I've said for a couple months, if you need help factoring, just come talk to me in class. We need to lock that down. Okay, so we're sitting here with these. Now we go back to our steps. So the first step is identify our least common denominator, or our LCD. And the denominator of the first fraction is x minus 5. The denominator of the second fraction is x minus 2. And the denominator of the third fraction is x minus 5 and x minus 2. So the least common denominator is going to be both of those factors. Because my goal, if you remember from the last example, my goal here is if I multiply the entire equation by this LCD, I want to be able to get totally rid of all my fractions. So if I put x minus 5, x minus 2 in the numerators, I need to be able to cancel all the denominators out. And this will allow me to do that. So step 2, if you're following the steps that I provided at the beginning. So step 2 is multiply the entire equation by your LCD. So my LCD is x minus 5, x minus 2. Then my middle term, 2, and then it's x minus 5, x minus 2 equals 10, and then x minus 5, x minus 2. Sorry, this takes me a minute to write. I wish I could write faster. All right. So the red is me multiplying the entire equation by my x minus 5, x minus 2. Now we go through and we need to see what can I cancel out. So in the first fraction, x minus 5 is gone. In the second fraction, x minus 2 is gone. And in the third fraction, boom, both factors are gone. So now I started with this fraction disaster at the beginning, And now I have 4 times x minus 2 minus 2 x minus 5 equals 10. Distribute everything out, because again we're solving, so we're not done until we solve for x. Again, be careful, this is negative, so distribute the negative. I got to combine like terms on the left side, so I've got 2x plus 2 equals 10. Got to move up here because I'm out of room. Minus 2. I don't know why I wrote minus 8 over here. So I get x equals 4. And again, last step on these, just make sure if you plug in 4, it doesn't make us divide by 0. And I have x minus 5 and x minus 2 in the denominator, so I can't have a solution of 5 or 2, but I only got a solution of 4, so we're good on the extraneous front on this problem too. We'll see some in class. It just so happened that these two worked out to not be extraneous. So identify your least common denominator. We need to multiply every piece of the equation by your least common denominator, whatever that is. The reason we multiply by this is it gets to eliminate all the fractions. If you look at this step right here, that's me multiplying. And the reason we do this is it sets us up nice right here where we get rid of all the fractions. Ignore my dog if you can hear that. And then we just distribute and solve for x. So that's solving by least common denominator.